All right, welcome back, everyone. We're working on our asteroids type game. And in this section, we're going to talk about shooting stuff. But we also want to make it so our ship comes to a stop when we're not pressing any keys. And there's different ways we can do it. What we're going to do is we're going to add an event, and I want to talk about the step event. So we add the event. It's called step. And this step event gets run every frame in every second. So we set the frame rate to 60 frames per second. So this is going to run 60 times while we are playing. And for the step, this is where we're going to slow it down. We're going to grab execute code. We're going to drop it right in here. And what we're going to do is we're going to reduce the speed until it gets to 0. The way we're going to do that is use a cool little function called max. So we're going to set speed to max. And what max does is you give it as many numbers as you want, and it finds out the highest number. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it speed, and we're going to subtract. And in my case, I'm going to subtract, I don't know, I'll put 0.15. Okay. And let's go ahead and close it so you can see kind of what's going on here. You don't need to see that anymore. So we're going to set speed equals to max, speed minus 0.15, and then we're going to give it a value of 0. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us the higher of the two numbers. So let's say we start off with a speed of 5. And we run this code. We set speed now to 5 minus 0.15. And it's less than 5, but it's still greater than 0, so it returns this number. And it keeps doing this 60 times a second. Okay, after 60 frames in 1 second, we've reduced the speed by 60 times 0.15. And so as soon as speed goes lower than 0, let's say it's negative 0.15, just negative 0.15, 0 is the greater number, so it then sets speed to 0. So it just keeps setting speed to a lower number until 0 is the highest of the two numbers, in which case speed is set to 0. It just stops us at that point. Let's go ahead and test it out and just see if it works. So go ahead and click run. I start speeding up, and now I'm going to let go. And you can see it stopped pretty fast. Now, one of the things is that my acceleration is a little bit on the slow side, and the reason why is because we are doing this currently at the same time we're running key down up. So what happens is at some point we reduce the speed during step, and then the key down, we add the motion here, but this number is now being affected by the step. So one of the things you may want to do is adjust the numbers here. You give a higher number in the key down up under this motion add, and it will accelerate faster. The other thing is I said don't go faster than 15 pixels. Somewhere I changed this number, so I'm going to change this back so I can go a little bit faster. But just know that the step is happening as well as this key down up. So even though we're holding the key down, this step is still occurring, and so we're still subtracting from that particular speed, which has a net result of slowing it down. So if you think it doesn't accelerate fast enough, then on here, give this a higher number. Try 0.45. And go ahead and test it out and just see if it accelerates quickly enough. It's really going to be up to you and what you think about the game mechanic. And you'll notice it stops still pretty quickly. So play around with these numbers until you get exactly what you want. So I'm going to leave you with step. If you need to code that, take a moment, change that, execute code on step to setting speed to the maximum of these two numbers. All right, so at this point, let's make a sprite for our bullet. And for added bonus, because you're all such a swell audience, I am going to show you how to animate a cool bullet. All right, so we're going to go ahead and put SBR_bullet for the name of our sprite. We're going to resize it. We're going to make it 5 by 5. So if you notice, what I did is I just clicked on this little icon, and it's for the resize sprite icon. Over here, we're going to type in 5, and notice how this automatically adjusts to 5, the width and the height, because the aspect ratio is maintained. If I change the width, the height changes accordingly. If I type 50, it becomes 50 on the other. All right, we're just going to go ahead and click apply. So now we got a really tiny one. We're going to edit our image, and we're going to use the paint bucket, come up with a nice bright color for our image. I'm going to start with yellow. Get a nice bright yellow. Get the paint bucket, also known as the fill tool. I'm going to click in here and click in the center, and I've got my first sprite. It's yellow. Now, if I just leave it like this, it'll be a yellow bullet. Will look fine. But one of the cool things we can do is we can animate it. So I'm going to click on the little plus sign, and that gives me another sprite sub image, and I'm going to make that green. And click in the center, and I got yellow, green, and let's add even another one. And we're going to make it really wacky. We'll do hot pink, and then maybe we'll do a bright blue. Click on here. We'll use this kind of a blue, etc. Now it's going to cycle through these colors. I'm going to hit enter, and you can see what that does. All right, try not to get a seizure. And here we go. Sprite bullet. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom in on this right here. Full screen it. Now the origin is 0, 0, so it's the upper left-hand corner, so we want to fix that. I'm going to choose middle center. It's the same as setting it to 2 and 2. This becomes the center. And the origin is going to be important because when the bullet spawns, it's going to spawn related to its origin. And our sprite's pretty much done. Like I said, it's an animated sprite, so it's kind of cool. We're just going to leave that as it is. We need an object for our bullet, so I'm just going to right-click under Objects and create a new object. And we're going to follow the same naming convention we did before. OBJ stands for object. We put a little underscore there, and we're going to write bullet. We're going to add the bullet sprite right here. And we're going to leave everything else as is. It's going to be visible, not solid, not persistent. We'll not use physics. We'll do our own physics using GML. There is only one event we're going to add to this animated sprite, and that is going to be when we are outside of the room. Now, the reason why we're going to do this is we want to make it so that when the bullet goes outside of the room, we want to delete it. And the reason why we want to delete it is we're going to be firing a lot of bullets during the course of the game. Hundreds, possibly thousands of bullets. And if we don't destroy it when it's outside of the room, GameMaker won't know it needs to be destroyed, and it'll still keep tracking its location, even though it's way off of the screen. So we're going to make things a little easier on GameMaker, and as soon as it goes off of the screen, we want it gone. So we have the outside room. We're just going to drag the execute code over, and it's instance underscore destroy. And you just do open and close parentheses like that, end with the semicolon, and that basically just destroys it as soon as it goes outside of the screen. Should be self-explanatory. And so we're ready now to code our ship. Now, one of the things here is I just want to kind of point out the bullet doesn't do a lot. So right now, all it really does is when it goes off the screen, it sort of gets rid of itself. Makes it easier on us, the coder. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and program the object player. So now the player is going to be a little more interesting how we do this. So I want you to go ahead and edit that. And in our player, we're going to basically fire bullets by pressing the space bar. Okay, and in this case, we want to make it so that we don't want to just hold down the space bar and let it continually create bullets. So we want it just every time we press the space bar down. And in order to fire another bullet, we're going to have to let go and press it again. So for that, we're going to use key pressed. And we're going to use space. Okay, so if we press the space bar, we want it to create a bullet and send it on its way. So we're going to drag execute code over. Now for this particular portion, I'm going to be hiding everything because this is going to take a little space to sort of create what's going on and some explanation. So we're going to get a nice full screen here. The first thing I want to show you is just how to create or spawn a bullet. So we're just going to put on here, spawn a bullet at the ship's location. Okay, and so for that, we need to add a little bit of code. Okay, to spawn an object, you're going to use by the way, this is GML, this is GameMaker Studio version 2, and the code has changed from the earlier versions of GameMaker. In this case, we're going to create one called instance create layer. Now what this does is it creates an instance of an object and puts it on a particular layer, which is why it's called instance create layer. And now you've seen the word instance multiple times. So I'm going to, rather than explain it, I want to show you, then I'm going to explain what I mean by instance. In order to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. When we press space, we're going to spawn the bullet. We need to set its location. I'm going to give it X. X is the X position of the ship because it's the object player that is firing the bullet, right? And so this X is relative to this current object player. Same thing goes for the Y. Okay, so we're setting the X and Y. It's going to be the exact same location as the ship. It's actually going to appear where the origin appears. And then we're going to choose what layer it goes on. And let me just remind you, on the room, the layer, you have this instances. So that's what we're going to put here. We're going to put it in quote, instances. We put another quote, and now we have to choose the object that we're going to spawn, which is the obj underscore bullet. Put our semicolon here. Let's expand this out. There it is, obj underscore bullet. All right, so let's talk about what an instance is. Now, first of all, the word instance comes from object-oriented programming. And you notice we have some objects. And so this is technically a type of object-oriented programming. And the thing is we have this thing called a player and a thing called a bullet. Now, this is more of what programming, object-oriented programmers might call a class. So this would be just the general concept of a bullet. But watch what happens when I run this just as is. We're not done working on it, but I just want to show you what happens when we run it. So I start moving, and I hit space, and basically my ship is just kind of pooping bullets. So we don't want it to poop. We want it to fire bullets, right? So I'm going to go ahead and close this. Now, oh wait, I was going to show you why I was mentioning this. So as I start firing bullets, and I start adding some bullets to the screen, every one of these bullets is in a different location. Each one of these is considered an instance. This is an instance, this is an instance, this is an instance. So the term instance just refers to each individual instance or a occurrence of an actual object. So that's what the word instance is about. It's why you see that word all the time, because we're using object-oriented language. So there we have that. But what we want to do is we want to actually make it so that we can give it speed, set its direction, and do some other things. Well, unfortunately, this one line of code is not enough to do it. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to capture this instance of a bullet using a variable. And we're going to call it bullet. And we put bullet equals sign instance create layer. By doing this, we now have a variable. We have a word that we can refer to this particular instance. All right, we're almost ready here. And so once we have a variable now that represents that instance, we can now modify this variable. So we're going to put bullet.speed. Now, actually, we're going to start with bullet.direction. Okay, and we're just going to, now, by the way, so this is the direction of the bullet, and we're going to set it to image angle. And anytime we refer to this is considered a property, something like image angle, this is actually the angle of the object player. So we're saying the bullet's direction is going to be facing the direction of the image angle. And then we're going to hit enter, and we're going to set its speed. Bullet.speed equals speed, like so. Okay, so let's go ahead and test this out. We're going to fire the bullets and see how that works. And not working. Oh, weird. Okay, guess what I didn't do? I set it to the speed of the ship. I didn't want to do that. I don't know what I was thinking. Let's try a speed of 20. That was kind of funny. You'll notice they sort of followed the ship. There we go. Now notice where it's spawning. It's actually spawning in front of the ship a little bit. And the reason why it's doing that is our origin at 32 is a little bit towards the front of the ship, possibly. And the other thing is the speed of 20, actually, that's probably more of what it is. The speed of 20 is being added to its location here. So if you think it needs to appear a little behind, you could put an x minus 5, for example. Let's try running that and see how that works. And you can play around with these x and y numbers here. So notice how it's appearing right at the tip of the ship. So that's kind of cool. We could have it appear further in front. we can make it move up or down. So if we put a y minus, we'll put 15, make it exaggerated, it's going to appear 15 pixels above the origin. And the reason why that is because a y of 0 is actually the top of the screen. So if we're subtracting from y, we're moving it up. And that's kind of cool here, is you can see that this is appearing actually right there. So I think what we saw earlier with this x is more a matter of, with the speed of 20, it sort of jumps, and the next time we see it, it's out further in front. So it's basically it moves 20 pixels for every frame. So it sort of seems to jump out in front. And it's just an effect of the eye. But you can play around with these numbers to adjust where they go. And hopefully, now that you saw that, you realize that we could actually do more than one bullet. We could fire 2 bullets at once. And the way I would go about it, as I'm not going to tell you everything, I would, instead of doing it bullet, I might say bullet 1, and I'd change all these to bullet 1. And then what you could do is you could spawn another bullet and call it bullet 2. You would basically follow this format and make changes to the X and the Y depending on how you wanted it to appear relative to your ship. So hopefully this gets you going in the right direction. I'm going to go back a few steps and get rid of that. And at this point, I think we have everything ready to go. So we have our object bullet. We have our ship. Let's go back to see what's going on with the ship. Oh, there was one other thing that was happening, and I would love to figure out what the heck is going on with this. So these were the ones that we did. We did step, and we did key press, like so. Okay, so those are the ones that we did. One thing I think is interesting is that watch what happens when I go to run it. If I try to go rotate while I'm firing, the bullets seem to rotate as well. If I go forward, I can fire it. But now watch what happens if I try to rotate and go forward and fire. It doesn't seem to work, but it works going the other way. Okay, so I have a student that thinks he has a solution for it, and this is what I recommend we do. I recommend you right-click, and all you have to do is change the event to key down, and we could do WASD instead of left. That would be letters. And that would be W. And then right would be D. So we just go in and change the events. And that would be key down. That would be letters. And as I said, that would be D. And then instead of up, we would, I'm sorry, that was supposed to be A. I got that wrong. I'm trying to do 2 things at once. Trying to figure this out while doing it. So I'm not that good at it. So now we set that to A, and then key down, we change it to W. Key down, letters, W. Okay? And let's try it out now and see if that changes anything. Yeah. Interestingly enough, for whatever reason, it doesn't like it with the arrows. One other thing I'd like to show you to kind of fix it. So by the way, it's up to you whether you want to do that or not. But I find that actually resolves that issue. The other thing I recommend you do is on key press space, we have this bullet speed equals 20. One of the things you can do is you could set it to speed plus 10. And that way we get the speed of the ship and we add an extra 10 to it. Let's go ahead and test that out and see how well that works. And it seems to work. All right. So just understand, you can play around. You can change which keys you do just by changing it in here. You could play around with these numbers. Remember how I did this instance layer create? I'm going to set this back to where I originally had it. And at this point, I'll just leave you with the code that you see there for space. Stay tuned. In my next tutorial, we're going to cover asteroids. We're going to start making some things that we can shoot with our bullets. So stay tuned for that.